Räddningstjänsten i Kanadas huvudstad, Ottawa, har startat ett utbildningsprojekt för brandmän, delvis baserat på svensk modell, men också på modern forskning från amerikanska UL och NIST. Projektet, som kallas From Knowledge to Practice, försöker överbrygga de klyftor som finns mellan det europeiska sättet att jobba och det nordamerikanska.
In 2008 was over in Sweden in Irving, and then subsequently in 2009 went to Sandow and met some of those critical people that had developed some of the programs in Sweden. And then from there, as a group, we formed an International Fire Instructors Workshop, which is just a collaborative group that really looked at building fire literacy. And so that was my message to the group, was we needed fire literacy. Our objective was to build a fire dynamics program that we could all share. And so it became a much bigger project than a Canadian project. It's become an international project. And while it'll help modernize the Canadian Fire Services, I truly believe it'll impact curriculums in the fire service throughout the world. I believe the work is first rate and world class.
I think for a whole lot of reasons there's a perception that this is a European thing. I mean, certainly from an Australian perspective, we sent a lot of guys at different times over to Europe to look at how they fought fires, and for us it was the thing we were lacking was that underpinning fire science, and that's what we introduced into our training.
So we've seen the extreme ends of the flammability range. So what's going to do this time, when it's ready, is try to pick that sweet spot. So we've got the perfect mixture of air, the perfect mixture of gas. We should get a more powerful ignition. It should be a very sudden and powerful event. It'll also be a very short event.
De vetenskapliga grunderna i projektet stammar bland annat från de arbetssätt som utformades i Sverige på 70- och 80-talen och som sedan spred sig till Storbritannien, Europa och till Australien under 90-talet.
In terms of what was missing, I saw this big gulf between the North American model, which was heavily based on tactics, and the European model that was heavily based on science. And so one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that our tactics were informed by science, and that our officers and our firefighters understood what that science was, and then use that to support the tactics, or, if you will, evolve them to a manner or a practice, if you will.
There's a perception that firefighters, that's not necessary to have that knowledge. More stress has been put on the physical capabilities, perhaps, of how a firefighter operates. And I think what we want now is a thinking, knowledgeable firefighter as well as a physically capable firefighter.
And we're experimenting with the fuel loads. This is a fibre board that we're not really used to, so we've got to make sure that we're getting the right sort of conditions to teach the students what we need to teach them. So we've been changing one variable of the fuel at a time, so to make sure that the changes we're making are the ones that are giving us the results. So this will be our fourth burn, and I think we're getting pretty close to the right mixture of fibre boards and pallets that will give us the right sort of conditions for the students during the training sessions. We don't want a rapid development, we don't want too slow development. Ideally with fire development training or fire dynamics training, we need to actually show the students the stages leading up to the ignition of the fire gases. So we need to produce a good gas layer, a good smoke layer with unburnt fuel. We need that to be over the right length of time so the students get a chance to actually see that in the development stages. Because once we get ignition and the flames are rolling down the ceiling, that's the final stage of development, and we're moving away from the actual teaching fire behaviour into the opportunity to practice nozzle techniques and experiment with ventilation.
Det är framförallt den svenska modellen för brandgaskylning med dimstrålrör som det senaste decenniet delat den nordamerikanska kontinenten i två läger. De som är för en reformering av amerikansk räddningstjänst och de som vill fortsätta jobba främst med utvändig släckning och stora mängder släckvatten.
Look, I think it is extremely useful. Primarily it's about understanding fire behaviour and fire development and the impact that air has on fire development, the fuel type and configuration. That's really what the program's all about, and I think that often when it's been introduced along with some additional techniques, some techniques that have been added on. And one of those techniques is gas cooling. One of them is door entry. And I think some people misinterpreted that to say that, well, this is the way we fight fires now. So all that stuff you did in the past, forget about that. Straight stream is gone. You don't need smooth bore. You do everything with a fog nozzle and your gas cool. And that's not the case. It is one technique that is extremely effective when it's used in the right context.
Det är just dessa kulturella skillnader som projektledaren och initiativtagaren Peter McBride försöker överbrygga med sitt utbildningsprojekt.
Well, we're very careful, again, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, to use that old expression, is that there are fire departments that will, because of budgetary reasons, philosophical or built environment, choose not to use a certain technique. That's okay. But they need to know what their techniques can do and what they can't do, and how to apply them safely and effectively. And so I think we've described that. And at the same time, there are departments want to choose to adopt other methods. Again, they have the support to understand, and they can go look at it and evaluate that science for themselves, and at the same time, decide whether or not they want to integrate that information into their operational culture.
Ytterligare en parallell till Sverige är ett strikt hygienprogram som har kopplingar till projektet Friska brandmän i Skellefteå.
Our studies show that firefighters, even with full protective equipment, we saw a 1,000-fold increase in certain chemicals that were only associated with particles. How did they get in if we were wearing SCBA? It must have passed through our gear and through our clothing. Any firefighter I've ever met, if they were covered in blood from a medical call, they would strip out of that gear, they would put it in a bag, and then they would double bag it, and the bag would say bloodborne pathogen or a pathogen. Well, smoke and the byproducts of smoke, they're toxic substances, and those toxic substances are harmful to humans. And so we should treat them the same way. We have to understand that we got to keep the fire ground out of our fire trucks, and we have to keep the firefighter that's dirty and get them clean before we put them back in service. So that's our concept.